Welcome. My name is Professor Eric Bell, and I'm here today with one of our chef instructors here at Joliet Junior College, Chef Tim Bucci. We actually go back quite a ways. Back in the early 2000s, Chef Bucci and myself worked at Le Cordon Bleu, and he was the chef in the student-run restaurant at the school in Chicago, and they hired me to come in and kind of take over and run the front of the house service aspect of the restaurant there. We're here at Joliet Junior College in the City Center campus, and we are going to talk to you a little bit about wine and food pairing today. However, just so you know, we offer a associate's degree in culinary arts. You can come here 2 to 2.5 years and finish that degree and receive that degree here from Joliet Junior College. So, Chef, today we're going to be talking cooking some food, and so the things you're going to be cooking today are these things that you teach, the skills and techniques that you teach at school here at JJC?
Yes. Some of these skills are taught in our 112 class, which is our beginning fundamentals class, and then they're reinforced in our advanced classes when you become a sophomore. So we're doing a little sauteed scallop with salt, pepper, a little bit of fennel seed, on top of some shallot, sauteed spinach, a little bit of sea salt, and then we're going to make a orange and basil butter sauce to go with the scallop.
Sounds good.
And which I think is going to go really nice with that wine. So
yeah, and so then I teach a class called Flavor Pairing Dynamics. And the Flavor Pairing Dynamics class basically teaches you those principles of how to pair wine and food together. And so basically what we do is initially, the students that are taking this class have gone through most of the classes here at the school. And initially we kind of hold them by the hand and tell them, this is the wine you're going to use, this is the food you're going to cook. But eventually they get to the point where they can actually figure out what foods they're going to cook. They can actually pick the wines that they're going to cook, and then they'll actually go into the kitchens and we'll cook the food, and then we'll sit down and we'll kind of analyze what they did and how they cooked the things and what the things taste like, kind of do a little bit of analysis on that kind of stuff. So we're standing here today in our demo kitchen in our City Center campus. It's a $58 million City Center campus. We have 11 state-of-the-art kitchens. We have 2 student-run restaurants. Chef Bucci and I run the restaurant downstairs, Thrive Restaurant. You can come in for lunch on Wednesdays from 11 to 12:30. And then this semester, we're actually doing dinners on Thursday from 6 to 7:30. It's a really good idea to make a reservation. We're very busy in the restaurant. The phone number is 815-280-1201. And then we also have another restaurant that's run by the students called Savour, and that restaurant is open for lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 12:30. So this is kind of part 1 of our series that we're going to do food and wine pairing. Today we're going to be talking about this wine here. This is a Sauvignon Blanc called Chasing Venus Sauvignon Blanc. It's from Marlborough, New Zealand. You can actually purchase this wine at Binny's for $13.99. This wine is extremely lively and refreshing. It really exemplifies wines from the Marlborough region of New Zealand. Lots of acid, lots of tropical fruits, lychee, like pear, watermelon flavors and floral, some pineapple in the smells. The flavors really high grapefruit for me. When I drink Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, I get a lot of grapefruit, citrusy orange, and lime flavors, mango, papaya. There's a fruit called gooseberry that kind of tastes like a little bit like an underripe grape. And then a little bit of mineral and a little bit of herb in this case. Structurally, this is kind of a light-bodied wine, has a lot of acid, a little bit of residual sugar to kind of balance out some of that acid. We use the term pithiness to describe it's that like white part of the inside of a grapefruit or the inside of a lemon or a lime. Really refreshing, really beautiful. If you're going to sit on your back porch in the summertime just to drink this, it's really, really, really beautiful. But a little bit of a shorter finish. So we talked about the 4 S's last week. So Chef and I are going to kind of taste this wine right now. And we're going to just kind of take a look at it to see if we can kind of come up with some ideas with it. So the color here is kind of a yellow color, right?
It's a lot of
spinning
fruit.
Around, a lot of fruit. So yeah, just beautiful citrusy grapefruit, orange. A lot of those pineapple, tropical fruit flavors are kind of there.
get like grapefruit right off the...
Yeah, so typically with Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand, that's usually how you can kind of just define it. Once you take a taste of it, you can kind of really taste that citrusy grapefruit flavor.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, so for me, right off the bat, that grapefruit hits you really hard. Really beautiful, citrusy. It's really minerally, though. You can kind of taste like almost a chalky, grassy sort of flavor going on, a little herbaceous. It's got some really good balance. I'm getting a really nice orange kind of flavor in my mouth now. It's got some good sugar in there to kind of balance it out, but it's definitely, I would say, highly acidic in this case, right?
Which I think will go really nice with the scallop dish.
Good. Okay, so what are you cooking today?
As I said, we're doing a little sauteed sea scallop. So we have some really nice, these are what we call dry pack sea scallops, which means they're not packed with any phosphates that help retain water. So the nice thing is when you get something like this and you go to saute them, they're not going to release a lot of that liquid. And that's a big problem when you're sauteing scallops that are possibly frozen and have that phosphate in them. The phosphate is called sodium tripolyphosphate. It'll usually say on a label if you buy a frozen bag if it has it. If it does, it's not the worst thing. You just need to really dry them out so it helps to pull out the water. You could even add a little bit of salt to them, let them sit a little bit, help pull out some of that moisture, and then dry them out again. These are not packed with them, so you can see that they're very dry, and I'm going to get a really nice sear on this. So and then we have a little sauteed spinach with some shallots. I love shallots, nice and sweet. We're going to finish that with a little bit of, this is a Maldon sea salt. So it's a coarse sea salt. It's going to give a little bit more mineral content, which I think it's going to help really pair with the wine with this sea salt. And then we're going to make a really quick, simple butter sauce to go with that. So right now I have a stainless steel pan heating up. You could use a nonstick pan if you're worried about them sticking. But if your pan is hot and your scallops are very dry, you're not going to have that problem with them sticking.
So Chef, real quick, a scallop is what?
It's a bivalve. It's like a mussel, a clam, an oyster. Has this really beautiful shell. Okay, these come from the North Atlantic. They're cold water. You can also see like bay scallops. Those are a little bit smaller type of a scallop. So very sweet, which again, with the acid in the wine, will help kind of cut through some of that sweetness of the scallop.
Beautiful. And then if you were to not buy the dry pack, or the scallops were really, really wet, and you went to cook them, what's that going to do?
Just the moisture is going to start being released. So when you have a phosphate added to a scallop, or say like a water-added ham, you know, that's when something is labeled like water added, usually has some kind of phosphate, and that's a water retainer. When you go to cook that water starts coming out if you're not careful. And if this water starts coming out in the pan, you're not going to get a really good hard sear and a really good browning of those sugars.
Good.
So we're going to season these. A little bit of, this is some kosher salt and some fresh ground black pepper. We grind our own pepper down in the restaurants and for the classes, just much better flavor. You can also use a pepper mill. Just lightly season it with some salt, and I always say a little less pepper, okay, and make sure it's even. I have just a little bit of olive oil. This is not extra virgin olive oil, just regular olive oil, like a blend. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil has a very low smoke point, so we're not going to really get a good high heat on this. Once I start to see that oil shimmer or a little bit of smoke coming out, then we're going to add our scallops. And don't be afraid to just gently put your scallops in the pan. You can use a pair of tongs if you'd like. Now, one of the things that most people want to do when they put something in the pan is that they want to turn it right away. They want to look at it. And I always tell students that you need to have confidence when you're cooking. You need to be able to kind of know your heat. You need to hear what's going on in the pan. you could see what's going on in the pan, and I could walk away, I can do something else, and still feel very comfortable that everything is working out here with my scallop.
And remember, for us, we're talking about matching a wine here that is a really light-bodied wine. And so chefs what method are you using to cook?
This is saute. It's a dry heat cooking method. And I would say, a medium heat. I cook very few things over really high heat, unless it's like a really thin piece of meat that I want to get a really good hard sear on it. If you let this pan heat up, it's going to retain that heat, especially a stainless steel pan, which is a little bit heavier bottom. Non-stick is good, but the problem with a lot of non-stick pans is they're very thin. They lose their heat very quickly. Now, already I can see the crust kind of developing on that scallop. And that's what we're looking for, that really nice browning of the sugar. So a lot of people will call that caramelization. There's actually a term for that. It's called Maillard browning, when you brown the sugars in the presence of amino acids. So if you just take sugar in a pan and caramelize it, that's called caramelization. So this is called Maillard browning. So we're getting a really beautiful crust on our scallops.
And again, we want to try to avoid adding too much body to the food that we're cooking because the wine is so light. And remember that first principle of pairing wine and food, and the most important principle is that mirroring the body of the food and the body of the wine. And so we're really going to do a little bit of stuff here. You notice he just put a little bit of salt and pepper on it. He's using that, the Saute method, which really doesn't add a lot of body to the wine. And so we're just trying to make sure that those bodies are kind of staying similar.
Yeah. I'm adding a little bit of ground fennel seed just to highlight a little bit of that scallop, a little bit of that licorice flavor from the fennel. While that's cooking, now you can see that crust. It's just a beautiful crust. It's going to give it some really nice texture. No moisture is coming out. If there was, I wouldn't be able to get that crust on the scallop. So while that's going, and we're going to let that go for about another minute, we're going to start our sauteed spinach. I have a half a shallot here. I love shallots, kind of a cross between an onion and garlic, a lot more mild. It's a little sweeter. And I have a saute pan here. We're going to heat up on a medium heat. And we're just going to cut this shallot in half. I'm just going to use half. When you're cutting something like this, or using, when you're cutting anything, keep your fingertips tucked under. And you're going to actually lift the knife for this instead of trying to cut down. That's only if you're doing smaller items. This is a little bit bigger. If I do that, I'm going to hit that knuckle. Keep your fingertips tucked under. Nice thin slices. You get to the end, you can just kind of tip it. And now you can see how my knife changed. Now I'm slicing instead of lifting my whole knife.
And this is a scallop shallot is a little bit more mild than an onion too, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's going to help with us keeping that food and wine kind of pairing at a little bit of a lighter place with the body perspective.
So we're going to saute those a little bit first, kind of get them soft. Now my scallop is good. I'm going to take those out. Beautiful color on both sides. And I just have a little paper towel here just to absorb some of that fat. If your pan is dirty and if it looks burnt, you can wipe that out. What we're going to do now is, I'm going to go here because there's nothing happening there. Huh? Okay.
And then, so the other thing we talked about last week a little bit with you, is the comparing and contrasting aspect. And so, so as we're thinking about this recipe and what we're cooking with, and we want to look at the comparing and contrasting aspects. So this wine, again, super acidic, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're going to try to help balance some of that out with the sauce we're creating here. We're going to do a little bit of a butter sauce with, and so that butter, that sometimes when you're eating food and it's really creamy and fatty in your mouth after 2 or 3 bites, it just gets overwhelming. And so this acid really is going to help with that. It's going to kind of help cut through that a little bit, sort of make it a little bit more easy to eat the next bite and kind of cleanse our palate a little bit. We also have the butter's really has got a really sweet flavor to it, which is also going to help contrast some of the acid in the wine. And so sometimes I find that New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are so acidic that it really gets overwhelming at some point where you're drinking it, and it's like so acidic. And so this butter, this creaminess of the butter is going to help kind of dissipate some of that acid and allow us to kind of maybe taste some of those tropical pineapple, orange, and grapefruit flavors in the wine, where we can't really taste them because the acid is so acidic.
Sounds great.
Yeah. And then the last one here is the bridging aspect. So bridging is really flavors, right? And so with this, we're going to do a little bit of are you doing an orange? Yeah, like a little bit of orange zest, orange juice. And so we have those tropical flavors in the wine, the orange and the grapefruit, that are going to help kind of bridge those two flavors together. And so that'll be the third thing. Bridging's not the most important aspect when we're doing pairing, but certainly we can see how it plays off of each other once we get to taste the food and the wine together. So
great.
Those scallops look delicious.
Yeah.
It smells. I wish you guys
Great
could
color.
be here. It smells so good.
So we're going to add a little bit of fresh orange juice and a little bit of orange zest. We don't want to add too much orange zest because it's going to make our sauce a little bit too bitter. If your pan is hot, so we deglaze our pan, pick up any of that fond, those caramelized bits that are stuck to the bottom. If your pan is hot, that orange juice is going to reduce fairly quickly. You got to be careful. We don't want to reduce it all the way until it's dry. We want to kind of cook it down until it's about half. And then we're going to add a little bit of heavy cream. Not a lot. I don't want a lot of heavy cream here because then it's going to start to mask the flavors of our sauce and the flavor of the orange and the basil. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let this reduce, let some of that moisture in the cream evaporate until it just starts to thicken. And there's ways to kind of look at to see the thickness of a sauce as it reduces. You know, a lot of times we teach students the term nappe. And if it coats the back of a spoon and you run your finger and it doesn't start dripping down, but you can see how it's starting to drip down. So this sauce needs to reduce a little bit more before we add our butter. Okay, now our shallots, we got a little bit of color on our shallots. We're going to add our spinach. And we're just going to saute that.
And you mentioned adding the butter at the end. Why would you do that?
If we add the butter too soon and we start letting it boil, the butter is going to separate out. So right now, you can start to see that it's a little bit thicker already. If you want to check the consistency, again, we call it a nappe. So you can start to see it's running less. Now, if you reduce this too much and you start to add your butter in, and you notice that it gets thick, you can always add just a little pinch of water to it. It's not a big deal. You basically evaporated some of the moisture out of the cream, and it made it a little thicker. If you add the butter too soon, you can't evaporate it anymore because then what happens is it's going to break and get greasy. So we're just going to kind of swirl that in. I'm going to stir my spinach around. My spinach is almost already ready to go. When I do spinach, I don't really go all the way with it. I'll let the heat of the pan and the heat of the spinach kind of carry it over. So I'm just adding a little bit of black pepper. That is all I'm going to do with that. I'm going to turn off my pan. We'll let that kind of sit. Finish up our butter sauce. So we'll add another little piece of butter. Again, we're just kind of swirling this in. We call this monter au beurre, to mount with butter. And my heat of the pan is enough to kind of melt this butter into my sauce slowly. You want to use cold butter so it melts slowly into your butter sauce. If you use soft butter, room temperature butter, it just melts too fast. You end up getting a greasy sauce. All right. And you never want to just throw butter into something and just let it melt, because then it's just going to float on top. So you can start to see already how that butter is becoming emulsified in our cream. And now it's getting a really beautiful coating consistency, that beautiful nappe. If you're unsure what nappe is, what actually it is, real maple syrup is the closest thing to a nappe. So if you're ever curious about that. And real maple syrup, not imitation. So you can see my spinach just kind of continue to wilt, and it's still beautifully green. We got the sweetness of our shallots. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of fresh basil to our sauce. I have some basil leaves here, and I don't typically roll up my basil. A lot of people will roll it. I feel like it still does some damage to the herb when you are rolling it up. So what I do, since this basil leaf is so wide, I'll just take it and stack it. And if I want to save time, I can keep stacking until I have this nice little pile. And then I'm using that nice slicing technique, keeping your fingers tucked under. And you want to slice through it with a sharp knife because you want to keep this basil really nice and green. If you start to chop it and really break down the herb, you're going to start to release a lot of the chlorophyll in the herb, and it's going to start turning brown. Yeah. Okay? So a little bit of fresh basil.
And that's always added at the end, correct?
Oh, yeah, especially basil, because it's, the flavors just kind of come out quickly. If it's like thyme or rosemary, I might add it a little sooner.
Gotcha.
And then we're going to finish this with a little bit of fresh lemon juice, just to break up some of that richness of that cream. There's acid in orange, but it's not enough acid that's going to break up that fattiness of the butter.
And notice Chef's doing the same thing that we're doing with the wine and food pairing thing, right? He's actually doing some of those structural comparing and contrasting elements in the dish itself to sort of balance out the dish. So if you're not having wine with it, it's still going to have a nice balance to it, right,
yeah.
Chef?
Yep. All right. So I added a little bit of salt and pepper. Yeah, pairing, developing flavor in food and tasting wine is really the same.
Yep.
You're the expert on the wine. A little bit of salt. Love that orange. Now we're going to plate up. So we have our spinach. Now, what I like to do is just finish this. This is a little bit of some finishing salt. This is a coarse sea salt. It's called Maldon. And I love it because you get a little bit of the texture of the sea salt. High mineral content salt. We're going to add just a little bit of that. And we're going to just go ahead and plate this scallop. This would be kind of an appetizer, say, in the restaurant. Nice little starter.
Remember, salt's an enhancer, right? So as he's adding that salt, it's enhancing the flavor of the food, but it's also going to carry over into the wine. It's going to really enhance some of the really beautiful tropical fruit and acidic flavors that are in the wine at the same time.
And then we have our beautiful sea scallop. I will say, nice color.
Looks great.
And then I'm also going to add just a little bit of finishing salt right on that scallop, just to get that little crunch, little burst of flavor. And then our butter sauce. So, like I said, if the sauce to me is perfect nappe, it looks great. If it's too thick, you can add just a tiny bit of water, a little couple dribbles until you get to the consistency. If it's too thin, there's really not much you can do at this point. You can't really reduce it down because then the butter is going to separate out. So then we'll just take our sauce, and I'm just going to go right around the perimeter of that spinach. I don't want to cover that beautiful color of that scallop. I want to show that to my guests. Spend all this time getting a really nice color on it, and then you cover it up with sauce. And that's our scallop dish.
All right, so we're going to actually kind of taste it, and we're going to talk about the wine and the food pairing and see kind of how we think it went. There might be some things that we taste, and maybe we might change some things in it. And that's the beauty of doing this for the first time and tasting these two together to see how they work. And if we wanted to make changes to something within the food, or maybe choose a different type of wine or a different maybe location that made the wine, and we can actually talk about that. So again, I would always take a drink of the wine first here, guys, right? You want to cleanse your palate off, and then take a bite of the food, and then take another drink of the wine to see how it goes. So again, the super light, beautiful. I can smell the grapefruit. It's just really, really beautiful. And again, you want to try to get all of the elements of the plate as you're tasting it. So I'm going to take a little bit of the scallop. I'm going to take a little bit of the spinach and the sauce and kind of put them together. Wow, so beautiful. Just the orange flavor, and that's just... Mm-hmm. And the bitterness from the spinach. So the first thing that I feel is just that acid Right, we're doing a comparing element there where it's just making it really super bright in your mouth. I can really taste the orange flavors going on. The food itself is super delicious. It's still really light and beautiful, and it goes perfectly from a pairing perspective. Body of the wine, body of the food go really, really nicely together. I can really taste the sweetness in the butter, and it's kind of helping dissipate some of that acid in the wine. It's really... I would say that we would call this a hedonistic pairing, where it's like the perfect pairing, right?
Never been called hedonistic.
Yeah, and so I would agree, and I think that salt addition not only made the food taste like just enhanced the flavor of the food, but it just really brought out the really beautiful mineral flavors in the wine. So we offer these classes here at JJC. Our students leave here and they go out and work in country clubs, and they work in restaurants, they work in hotels, in food service. They can do educational feeding, which is really kind of a growing segment of our industry. We have people that are going into food science right now today and working in places and developing recipes for large organizations. You can do travel and tourism type of feeding on cruise ships. We have high demand. We get calls regularly for restaurants and food companies looking for people to go to work for them, and we're always trying to place students in those types of jobs. So there's a really, really high demand for people that graduate from our program. We do have scholarships available, and so just remember, we are here in Thrive Restaurant on Wednesday for lunch from 11 to 12:30. We're here this semester on Thursday evenings from 6 to 7:30. It's a really good idea to make a reservation. Call us 815-280-1201. If you are interested in maybe coming in and talking to one of our advisors about taking classes, you can call 815-280-1251. And we'll get you set up with an appointment with one of our advisors. Next session we're going to be using a wine from Moselle, Germany called Beck's Riesling. And so if you want to go out and get that before you actually watch, you can actually pick that up at Binny's also. And then you can maybe taste it with us as we're tasting it, and maybe try to cook some food with it after you've kind of done that. So thanks again for coming in and seeing us today. Really appreciate spending some time with us. We're going to save a seat for you, whether that's here in the restaurant, in Thrive Restaurant downstairs in the student-run restaurant, or if you want to come in and take some classes with us, we'd love to have you come and do that. So thanks again, and have a really wonderful evening.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.